Hello everyone, this is Leah from Manuscript Manager and welcome to our tutorial where I'll be showing how to configure the author submission process. What I'll do right now is just click on the author role to come into what the author would see when they submit a new manuscript. We have a lot of dummy manuscripts in our demo, but down at the bottom we have this button called Start a New Submission. This is the very button authors would see when they start a new submission. If we go ahead and click on that, it brings us into the Submission Tabs page for authors. Each of these tabs corresponds to a page that contains a series of tasks the author would have to perform during the submission process. Of course, the final page here is where they submit their manuscript. But what I'd like to do today is to show you how you can configure these tab pages to suit the purpose of your journal. Each of these pages has elements that are editable. In order to show you that, I'd like to change roles right now, come out of the author role, and go into the Editorial Office role. It is the Editorial Office, or in other words, the Principal Administrator for your online journal, that can configure this section. I'll go ahead and click that. And now I'm in the Editorial Office dashboard. I would go to Configure, and that presents me with a series of tabs corresponding to different sections of my online journal that I can configure to suit my journal's purposes. You might have guessed that we'll be going into the Submissions section today. Here is the Submissions section, which allows us to go into these various elements that are editable and make choices that suit our journal. The first one is called General. This is where you control your manuscript submission status. You can use the radio buttons on the left to control whether you are open for new submissions or not, and whether you are open for resubmissions or not. The Guidelines page is next. This is where you can copy and paste your guidelines for submission. You can also copy and paste a link with your guidelines. The third tab is labeled Authors. As a default, the submission process allows the submitting author to input information about co-authors. This is where you can turn this feature off if necessary. The Details tab is next. This section shows the elements that appear on the Manuscript Details submission page. This is where the opportunities for configuration become a little bit more complex. On the Details page, as well as on the Files and Accompanying Info page, you have several options for editing. Just to familiarize ourselves, let's look at this page. We have Manuscript Title. You can see it's in this very light gray box. That's the first element. We have Manuscript Type. That's the second element. We have Journal Section. We have Category. And we have a section to type the abstract. In each of these element sections with the faded out gray box, you have another box that allows you to click and choose a number from the drop-down menu if you would like to reorder these elements. So as it is right now, we're looking at 5 elements with an option to change their order. Now we also have an edit button. I'll just go into this edit button for a second. I am now in the element that's called Manuscript Title. In case I want to change the label, I could click Edit, come in here and type something new. Also on this edit page, we have a radio button that allows us to make this element required or not. We also have a box if we feel the need to type a little bit of help for the person that will be seeing this element. And last but not least, we have radio buttons that allow us to decide which versions of this form will show this element. Will it be only for the first submission, or will it also be visible for resubmissions? Okay, let me go back. I'm going to leave that as it is, and I'm going to go on to another type of edit that you can make. You'll see our second element on this page is Manuscript Type. When a submitting author submits a manuscript, they can select from this drop-down menu and choose the type of manuscript they are submitting. However, if that list were not serving the purposes of our journal, we would be able to add or edit the attributes. In other words, the items on the drop-down menu. Let's go in and show how we would do that. You would click Edit or Add Attributes. And now we are in effect in the drop-down menu with the attributes that were listed. Here we could decide to delete structured abstract, for example, and perhaps add a new item to the list that's called technical note. Now that's been added, we would save and return. And you can see in the drop-down menu, technical note has been added and structured abstract has been deleted. So that's a second type of edit we can do on this page. We can edit the section itself, the element itself. We can edit the element's attributes. We can also delete. In the beginning I listed the 5 sections on this page. We have one that's called Journal Section, and we have another one that's called Category. Often these sections provide good information for large journals that have submissions to various different sections and categories. This information would also turn up in their reports that they generate. However, if one of these were not necessary, let's say you did not need an element called Category, you could simply click Delete. And that element disappears from your page. And last but not least, you can add an element. And you can select the type of element, a label, a text box, a text area, checkbox, radio button group, etc. So there are many possibilities on this details page. Continuing, I'll go on to the files page. The files page is where we have the instructions for uploading manuscript files, the possible designations for those files, and a radio button at the bottom of the page which allows you to turn off the Upload Files feature if necessary. Continuing on to the accompanying info, here you typically have elements that ask the submitting author to give additional information. You can see that our demo is set up with accompanying letter, declaration, and a point-by-point response that is valid for resubmissions only. Again, you could always configure this page to suit your purposes. Perhaps you'd like to add an element at the bottom to ask for information about funding or acknowledgments. This is another very flexible page with similar types of editing features that we've seen before. The Keywords tab is next. Again, just one radio button that would allow you to switch this feature off. When an author submits a manuscript, they will otherwise be presented with a drop-down list of keywords from which they can choose keywords associated with this manuscript. The keywords on the drop-down list are from the keywords list that you provide us with when we set your journal up. So they are your own keywords, but if for some reason you'd like to switch off this feature, you have a radio button right here to do so. And the last section is called Suggested Reviewers. This is the area in the submissions process where some journals like to ask the submitting author to suggest reviewers that could possibly review their manuscript. If you don't have use for this section, you can simply switch it off with this radio button down here. If you do have use for this section, you can change the number of reviewers that get suggested, and you can also change whether this section is compulsory or optional by selecting yes or no, and by changing this word right here from optional to compulsory. Just remember to do the 2 things at once. And that concludes our explanation of how to configure your submission process for authors. Again, if you have any trouble with these settings, do not hesitate to contact us. But good luck with the process, and I'll see you on the next tutorial. Thanks very much, and bye-bye.